The goat took its revenge, but ultimately it was Murphy who won out. And Cormac Campbell of the Newry Reporter has the story.
This is like Jack and Ori, Rowan.
But you know,
But do you want me to read the whole story about Murphy's goat?
I think it's such a good story you ought to.
Such a good story.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Murphy's goat appeared in the Reporter in 1915. So we just reprinted the whole thing because it's one of the best animal stories I think we've come across in a while. So an old man named James Murphy of Ashbury near Camla has been admitted to hospital in Newry suffering from 3 fractured ribs as a result of an extraordinary encounter with a female goat, his property. Murphy, it appears, was in the habit of feeding the goat at a regular hour, and the other morning he slept beyond his accustomed time, with the result that the goat, becoming impatient, butted in the door and made for Murphy's bedroom. Evidently intent on seeking an explanation, the manner in which he set about was rather forcible, as old Murphy had to take to the floor to defend himself. The encounter that ensued was brisk and vigorous, and old Murphy was badly getting the worst of it until he grasped a hatchet and felled his horny opponent, whose throat, it is stated, he afterwards cut to make assurances doubly sure. For this, however, the old fellow had got 3 of his ribs fractured and had to be conveyed to Newry for hospital treatment. The moral of the story, of course, is always feed your goat. So,
oh, dear.
Yeah.
Where do you find them?
well, that was in the archive from 1915. I was going through looking for a lot of the stories relating to 1915 for the looking back section. Obviously, relate to World War One. More serious matters, but sometimes you find a little gem like that.
Absolutely, that's a total gem.
So, you look like a man who hasn't given up on the Christmas spirit just yet. With
you look like a man who's commencing the growth process of a great beard.
Oh no, this has been here for a while.
Are you going to grow it fully?
No, it'll stay the same length. Magically, it doesn't
How do you
grow.
keep it the same length?
The technology is a wonderful thing, Rowan.
Really?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Electrical devices, really?
Yeah.
Now, the big question afoot in my circle of friends, and we meet for our annual get-together every so often in the telephone box over there, the big question circulating is, should Hand get rid of his beard and cut his hair short back to where he was? I think not.
I think you should keep growing it.
Keep growing.
Keep growing it.
Keep growing and keep going. That's the way it is. Now, your wonderful chronicle of the passing times, the Newry Reporter, is in your hand. So today, what are you telling us?
On the front page, I think, unfortunately, this is something that a lot of people who've needed an ambulance have been aware of for quite some time. It's that response times have increased by 50% in the last 2 years. So now you're waiting roughly 31 minutes on average for an ambulance, as opposed to roughly just over 20 minutes 2 years ago.
Is that from your research? Is that 30 minutes from the call out to you arriving back at E&A?
Well, I could tell you that, Rowan, if you hadn't ripped the story out of the paper. So quite honestly, I can't tell you. You need to read the paper and the story.
I do try, and you all will bear testimony to this. I do try to give credit where credit's due. I said in the Newry Reporter today, and I was heralding your good news and your awful news of ambulances. But I don't know. I mean, it's 30 minutes. You know, if you want to go, if you're in Warren Point,
minutes
you need it.
can be the difference between life.
But
and
if you're in
death.
Warren Point, is it unreasonable to think that an ambulance will take 30 minutes?
Well, it's clearly an investment issue when you consider that 2 years ago it was 20 minutes. So it's not a case that the drivers are driving slower.
No.
It's a case that there's less investment and less support for them.
They've only 2 ambulances at
to
Daisy
go about
Hill.
their
They've
work.
only 2 in Daisy Hill, based at Daisy Hill.
More paramedics, more ambulances, and you'd reduce that time considerably.
Yeah. And right across.
But
right across the 5 health service areas of Northern Ireland.
This is replicated.
Yeah, and also they've stopped operating this week, you know.
Yes. That's also the case.
Oh, you've dropped your microphone.
That's also the case
in
Beaumont Hospital in Dublin,
Indeed.
I believe.
Dublin. Did you see the RTE stuff last night?
I didn't.
They did Dublin, they did Cork, they did the hospital in Galway, and they did Drogheda, the Our Ladies in Drogheda. Absolute dreadfulness. Not only can people not get a bed now, they can't get a trolley. They're sitting in chairs.
But if you send them home, they're not sick anymore.
Yeah.
Of course,
Cameron is
seems
crying,
to be the mantra.
Cameron is crying across the water. He has similar problems, you know. So
Also on the front page, Esata Martini Dry has pleaded not guilty to 9 charges in relation to making bombs. 19-year-old Orlo Hanlon of Forkhill entered her plea before Newry Crown Court on Tuesday ahead of having her trial arraigned. She was arraigned. She was released on continuing bail of £25,000. Defence counsel for co-accused Keith McConnon, 20, also of an address in Forkhill, failed to turn up to the Newry hearing. So that case obviously is going to be continued.
I find that a very sad story. Like at the time of the alleged offence, they would have been 1 year younger, 18 and 19. Those are little beyond childhood. But somehow they were sucked into a situation allegedly by dissident Republicans. I do hope the wisdom of Lord King, he's Judge King out the road, who seeks to find the best way forward in all of these matters. And I do hope that wisdom applies, because somehow I think, maybe I'm just a sentimental old fool, but she's an 18-year-old girl when it occurred. You know, so we need to look beyond and beneath and find out the reasons, you know.
On page 2, never missed the opportunity for a little bit of chest beating.
Yes.
And that relates to yesterday afternoon. We got a phone call from the Department of Regional Development asking us to hold a page for a big story.
Hold that page?
For an hour. It sounded very interesting. We waited an hour and received a press release telling us that there would be a 2.5 million investment in Campbell Lake. Wonderful news. The only problem with this, however, was we had published it on page 3 of the November 12th edition of the newspaper with all the details contained in the press release. So we already had covered the story. Now, the point of highlighting this is recently with items such as Jennings Park, that only really came to light, the potential sale of Jennings Park. The community, many members of the community only really became aware of this in November, December when the community consultation papers went out. Now, this came as something of a shock to the members of the community who didn't read their paper, because the Newry Reporter had covered this in depth in July. So the point is, if you want to know what's going on in your area, that is what your local paper is for, and that is why this item has been highlighted, that the Campbell Lake investment had been highlighted in November, 2 months before the official word came out. Likewise with Jennings Park. Another thing, every year we seem to have a big project that captures the imagination, gathers a bit of pace, and sometimes they're delivered, sometimes they're not. Narwater Bridge, Warren Point Marina, we're still waiting on the Greencastle Ferry, a decision on that. Southern Relief Road, however, seems to be rapidly gathering pace, and there was an update on this at Monday night's council meeting. Now, the impetus for the update came from the fact that over Christmas the air quality in Newry descended into a pretty abysmal state, and Environmental Health Director John Farrell at Monday's meeting said the only solution to Newry's bad air quality is the Southern Relief Road. It would take a lot of cars outside of Newry. It would speed up the transit of vehicles through Newry, so there's to be less sitting at traffic lights, less build-up of bad air. Now, in asking for an update on the matter, Councillor Declan McAteer inquired about the Connecting Europe programme, which would be the funding programme that could deliver up to 40% of the roughly 100 to 120 million pounds for the project. Chief Executive Eddie Curtis said that he understood that a funding application for the project, which would link the Belfast to Dublin motorway with the Warren Point dual carriageway, would be lodged in the coming months. Such a development, and should funding be obtained, would mean building work would start in 2020 for the project, which is quite an exciting one. Now, one thing that will anger certain people in Warren Point from the project is that option 5 for the Relief Road, which was brought forward by the Narwater Bridge Action Group, which would be to build an Narwater Bridge and then enhance the road network over the Cooley Mountain Range, has been discounted, not because it's a bad idea, but because it could take up to a year to develop plans for that, which would mean it would miss the boat in terms of the funding application for Connecting Europe. So timing is everything in many of these things, and the timing is wrong for option 5.
And obviously, am I right to say, obviously, if the Southern Relief Road goes ahead, the narrow water bridge will not go ahead.
Well,
or is that too much to
as
say?
it stands, the narrow water bridge is not going ahead. It will require a subsequent future funding application or the will of government ministers on both sides of the border, or indeed the new council to invest heavily in road infrastructure, which is not something they traditionally do, although both Louth and Newry and Mourne, in a bid to save the project the last time, had promised to invest, I think, in the
Talking of new councils, the name has been agreed.
The name was agreed last night, and after something in the region of £30,000 been spent.
With consultants?
With consultants. They've agreed to keep the name that they've been using for the past 2 years. So
and that is Newry and Mourne and Down. Newry, Mourne and Down.
Which, interestingly, leaves South Armagh out of the mix.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably an irrelevance because...
Well, you say that, I'm going to interrupt you straight away there.
Yeah, go ahead.
But we have a story on page 6 of the newspaper this week, and Round Sands has another story in the paper relating to the plans of the Ring of Gullion Group in terms of what they're doing to enhance the South Armagh area. Now, one of the Ring of Gullion obviously are publicly funded. Then on page 6 we have a story about a privately funded initiative, which is the Cleavey Castle hotel project. The building work started in the Gatehouse. So if you're not drawing attention to the fact that this area of outstanding natural beauty is in this district, you're not doing
but I'm
justice,
saying these
and you're making it very difficult for investors who are spending millions of pounds.
The projects you're talking about, Gullion, are bigger than a mere name.
It doesn't help. The council is in charge of tourism.
You know yourself that you can't actually just extrapolate the name, just keep going. Newry and Mourne and Gullion and Carlingford
Mourne
Lough.
and Down in many ways is a repetition.
North Down.
North Down isn't
in the other area.
North Down isn't in the new council. So it doesn't even the whole of Down.
It becomes cumbersome, doesn't it?
Newry, Mourne and Gullion sounded like a reasonable...
Newry
at least
and Mourne and Gullion.
One thing I would say is it's preferable to Slieve Lock.
What is Slieve Lock? It's mountains and
it's
lock.
The name of a shop's own brand of meat products from factory farmed meat.
Oh dear,
Another story on page 6.
But let me make it clear before someone attacks me on this. I thoroughly support the wonderment of tourism in Gullion. I'm just saying it's bigger and stronger than a name.
We're moving from a place where there's been no tourism industry in the Ring of Gullion and South Armagh, and it's only because of the work of groups such as Mourne Cooley Gullion, Ring of Gullion Group, and some of the community groups around the area that this is starting to happen, and it's starting to bring in private investment, which is fantastic. So it doesn't help if the area is overlooked.
No. Well, they'll not be overlooked.
One thing that also could prove troublesome in the year to come is there is obviously plans to a need to refurbish lock gates and other projects at Victoria Lock. There's also a plan to refurbish Newry Town Hall. Sounds great. The money's budgeted in the council's books. The problem is they can't give a date of when these things are going to happen. And the problem with that is that Newry 2020 Group, who organised Yerk and Fleadh last year, want to start booking a headline act for this year's festival. And if they can't be told when the town hall is available, how can they book? Now, they can make a booking in the town hall subject to it being cancelled.
So that's nonsense.
They need to be told when this work will take place. And also another matter, now this isn't in this week's piece, obviously for the last 3 or 4 years, Newry has hosted Opera Year, the TG Carr BBC television programme, the music series. Again, if that TV programme will be filmed when the TV company wants to film it, not when Newry Town Hall is available. So if Newry Town Hall isn't available, Newry risks losing one of the few national events that takes place.
Absolutely.
Because people come from all over Ireland to that, plus the free publicity that the city gets as a result of it taking place here.
But is there no imperative within council, and you know council inside out, I rather think, to actually plan ahead and to say, we can tell you now that in 2016 or 2017 January we will commence the work.
Well, you see, the further problem is these works are put out to tender, and the Victoria Lock issue best exemplifies what is happening here. Now, originally a lot of works were put out to tender, and the bids that came back were far too high, way beyond the £250,000 budget that's been set aside. So what the council had to do was split the tender into the most important pieces that could be done for the price. It's currently out to tender, the redesigned tender. So that has to come back in before they can say when the works will take place. And the problem with that is Newry 2020 want to launch a maritime festival this year for June. But if they don't know that the basin is accessible from Victoria Locks, they want to bring in beautiful old vessels.
Yeah, of course.
And if they can't be assured that that's going to happen, they won't organise this festival, which could cost the tens of thousands of pounds to local traders, missed opportunity. So the further problem with the town hall is the town hall project has been split over 2 years instead of doing it all at once.
Well, so it's robbing us completely of the opportunity for...
Quite possibly then, this problem persists into 2016. So I remember Michael O'Leary, the Ryanair head honcho, controversial figure, talking about the proposed runway extension at Belfast City Airport.
Yes.
And the line he gave was, build it, don't build it. Tell us what you're doing, when you're doing it. And businesses can make a decision based upon that. Ambiguity, everybody loses.
Absolutely.
And
I hear
for
what
that
you're
purpose,
saying.
groups like Newry 2020 need to know as soon as possible when these projects are taking place. And if the council haven't thought of that, really, they should.
Yeah, I see you have Deborah Loughran there. You have a column there, Newry Matters.
Deborah Loughran, the president of Newry Chamber of Commerce, writes a regular column for the paper. And one of the issues she covers this month is how the town fared, or the city fared over the Christmas period. And it seems to have been quite positive, especially in the last week. The panic buying stage, probably when people's paychecks came in, people started spending a little. And, you know, coming up towards the week of Christmas, the shops seem to have done quite well.
She's happy enough.
She's happy enough with reservations, obviously. The changing euro exchange rate probably isn't helping cross-border trade. Now, with good news, there's always bad news, and the graffiti that was daubed on the walls in North Street, it seems, on one hand, there was certain messages made about Polish people. On the other hand, there was certain messages made about Irish people. So the police obviously are investigating what was written. Some of the grammar wasn't exactly what you would expect. But
it doesn't look to be the greatest hate crime in the history of hate crime. It's a modest enough bit of graffiti.
Still shouldn't be their own.
I know that, but I mean, if you put it into the context of the Ghanaian man in Belfast who had his home paint bombed, you know, it's an old wall at the corner of a yard or whatever it is.
One thing that could prove very costly and is very worrying, obviously we're well aware that there's a problem with fuel laundering in this area.
Yes.
Now, for the past 18 months, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency has picked up the tab for removing dumped fuel waste, illegal fuel waste cubes, some of which is really blighting parts of the countryside. Now, at Monday night's meeting, Director of Environment for the area, John Farrell, said that NIEA looks set to pull the plug on this, with no provision made for who then is responsible. So ultimately, it would appear that this problem is just going to fall on the local council. Now, the figure John Farrell gave in Louth, with the local authority, is responsible for dealing with the matter, and really they have a comparable problem. Louth County Council is out €1 million a year paying for the removal of this. So at the meeting, councillors, you know, we're in a sticky wicket really, because they were discussing, what do we do here? Do we just leave it to make a point? But obviously then, Slieve Gullion councillor Terry Hardy, he said, but if they put it in a river, the countryside could be absolutely destroyed in no time whatsoever.
I know it's an impossible one to fathom, but can there be that many more fuel laundering operations in South Armagh, bearing in mind the recent successes on the part of the PSNI and the Customs?
Successes? Are they successful? I mean,
decommissioned a number of them. Certainly two in my memory in the last 6 months.
You decommission one, another starts the next
day. Is that the way? Is that you think what happens?
I mean,
one down, another up.
Yeah. At the meeting, Crotleaf councillor Michael Carr also raised concerns. Now, the proposal is to bring in a super dye that can't be removed, and his line on this was, super dye there'll be a super crook out there to get it out. And
It's about right.
about
really.
right. If a chemist can put it in,
Yeah.
another chemist can
get
take it out.
Yeah.
So his viewpoint is take away the profit, take away the crime, which that essentially means that agricultural diesel costs the same as regular diesel, but the farmer can claim the tax back.
Wow, that seems
And
all right.
that's his solution to it. For one reason or
okay.
another, that has not been
Investigated
used.
yet. Where are you taking me now?
I'll quickly take you to sport, and then if we've time, we'll come back to news. McKenna Cup started the new GA season.
We're in our last 10 minutes, by the way.
Last 10 minutes.
Yes, you've had 15 minutes
Unbelievable
already.
things, huh?
You're ongoingly wonderful in your commentary, so
talk
we've
too
given you an
fast.
extra
Talking too fast.
15 minutes.
Back page, Two's company, almost 8,500 is a crowd. And that's largely based on the incredible crowd that showed up for Sunday's McKenna Cup game between Armagh and Tyrone.
Where was that game?
It was in the athletic grounds in Armagh. Now, McKenna Cup games might attract 2,000 people. It would be a healthy enough crowd, sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes you'd be talking in the hundreds. 8,500 roughly.
Was that because of the two teams? The teams were there?
Yeah, there'd be a massive rivalry between
What's going to happen?
Tyrone and Armagh.
You know,
and
who's
there was
the
a bit
big
of
guy?
there was a bit of bit of fisticuffs.
I saw
in
it.
the game.
The front page of the Irish News had it.
So Tyrone ultimately won the game. Now the point that has to be made about the McKenna Cup is it doesn't really matter altogether that much. Now managers are less concerned about the result and more concerned about unearthing new players and maybe experimenting to see what will work, what might not work. So a manager might be delighted with how something worked for 10 minutes and how a particular
And
player.
McGeaney did that, didn't he? Had one or two new
Certainly,
fellas
all managers bring in new players. So it was a losing start for both Down and Down lost to Cavan and Armagh lost to Tyrone. But
if they've lost to Cavan, God help them. What are they ever going to do?
Well, the thing that has to be remembered about the Down team as well is they're roughly working from half a deck at the moment because
Why is that?
Aidan Carr and Mark Poland are both on honeymoon. The 4 Warm Point players who are likely to be in the panel are still on Warm Point duty because Warm Point are in the All-Ireland semi-finals very shortly. Keelan Mooney, who will make us likely to be the star forward this year, well, one of them, that's disrespectful to the likes of Conor Laverty, is playing for Jordanstown because the universities get first pick.
Yeah, that's another kind of words to be unraveled.
And Martin Clark is yet to return from
his Australian
from illness.
Yeah, and illness as a consequence.
So from that point of view, Down are working from a weakened deck, but most counties are. There's injuries. There's universities choosing players. So the point isn't Down got beat by Cavan. It's that it gives the manager an opportunity to try new things, and there was a lot of new players. Armagh brought in new players. Down brought in new players. Panic not. Have a look at what they're trying, what tactics they're trying to employ, what they're working on.
Talk to me. I saw you fondling boxing.
Fondling?
There. Well, sure, that's what you do. You love
Fondling?
boxing. Yeah, you do.
One other thing I would say in terms of the GA coverage, there's a new column by Stephen Poocher. Discussing all things GA, so he'd be very well known in GA circles and possibly a future Down manager. You never know.
Wow!
So he's
not for a while.
He's shooting from the hip in some of his opinions about the local game. In boxing, obviously we've discussed Jason Barron on a number of occasions. He boxes in the Irish Senior Championships, which start this week. Obviously, he's the Ulster Super Heavyweight Champion for the last 3 years. He enters the Irish Senior Championships for the second time. Last year, he was drawn against the eventual champion, Con Sheehan. Now, Con Sheehan has won the Irish Senior 6 times. So Jason actually appeared to have floored Sheehan in their bout last year, although it was adjudged to be a slip. You can watch the fight yourself on YouTube. It was a left hook and a knockdown. He's going.
Is a left hook sore as a you've boxed and you're
Depends
like,
who
what kind of anesthetic is there in the adrenaline rush of the fight that actually makes the punch acceptable and not really painful?
Well, taking a punch is dependent on a lot of things. One of which is where your chin is.
Yeah.
Is your mouth open or closed?
Good look on.
Did you see the shot coming because you braced for it? What way your legs are located? The strength of your legs. Also, your fitness plays a large part in it. But part of it is simply your ability to take a shot. Now, some boxers, for example, Wayne McCullough, had an excellent chin. If you then look at an English boxer, Harold Graham, who had silky skills beyond belief, was possibly one of the best, most talented boxers never to win a world championship. He had a glass jaw. One famous incident, fighting Julian Jackson, I believe, he got to the 12th round, having dominated the fight, only to get clipped and knocked out and stopped. So Jason Byrne has a solid chin, so there's no concerns on that front. Should he progress and get to the final, it'll be on live television. So more people hopefully will get an opportunity to see.
We're there, are we?
Action.
Are we there?
Also, a new layout for the local football leagues. So nice, brighter, and hopefully definitely more readable. Well, it was always readable, but the layout looks beautiful now. There's
well recovered there, by the way.
There was a council meeting on Monday night. So Newry Council still meeting, although it's noted in the report that a number of the councillors no longer talk at the meetings. So it's a talking shop without talk from a lot of angles. So there is a full report in the meeting, and there was some very interesting debates.
Well, when it comes to talking, you take some beating.
Oh, step.
Cormac Campbell from the Newry Reporter, thank you very much indeed. See you next week.
You too.
Take care.